Hello, my name is Joshua, and I'm a student at Georgetown University's School of Foreign Service. And while I like teaching, I like all sorts of subjects in the humanities and in the physical sciences. The subjects that I'll like to teach and will be teaching are macro and microeconomics, US government and comparative government, physics C, and English literature and composition. So I went through the AP curriculum, and so I'll be focusing more on that side and the curriculum that's focused for those tests. So for macro and microeconomics, I've been teaching for 1 year, kind of through a semi-formal capacity at my old high school's student tutoring center. And the same can be said, I've taught for 1 year English literature as well. That being said, outside of school, I've been teaching with the Crossroads Education Group, headed by Mrs. Kyung Peck, and have been teaching English and writing in English grammar for 2 years there. For US government and comparative government, I've been teaching for 1 year, and for physics C, I haven't taught or tutored before, but very much enjoy the subject and look forward to doing so. Additionally, I really like rhetoric and persuasion and debate. So throughout my time in high school and hopefully in the years to come, I was very involved and engaged with public speaking. So that sort of thing I'd be more than happy to help with as well. And I love talking about persuasion and trying to convince other people of certain things. So today we're going to take a look at two pretty basic economic principles that apply to both macro and microeconomics, and then talk about those two principles in context of a question. So we're going to look at opportunity cost and advantage, both absolute and comparative. So let's start with opportunity cost. Opportunity cost is a hidden, implicit sacrifice cost. So it's the cost that exists when you sacrifice one thing to do another. So let's take a look at this little table that I made here. So this is the production output for the USA. And the USA can choose to either produce guns or butter. And I say or because they have to make a choice. They can choose to make 1 gun or 10 butter, and they can do one or the other. And if they do one, they have to sacrifice the other. So they can make 1 gun and give up 10 butter, or they can make 10 butter and make up 1 gun. In real life, for example, a little bit more easy to grasp ideas that going to university versus getting a job. So if you go to university, you're going to get an education, but you are sacrificing potential income if you had instead gone to a regular store and got a job instead. So we can actually calculate. We can calculate an opportunity cost of any given good, and I'm just going to unhide this with a pretty simple equation. So let's say we're going to try and find the opportunity cost of a gun. So I like to abbreviate opportunity cost to OC. So let's write OC guns, or a single gun, equals, and here we go, we have some signs here. Let's say OC guns, and okay, so we're looking for the opportunity cost of guns. So guns should always go in the denominator then. Gun in the top, and the denominator, and butter in the top. So we have these weird symbols here, these triangles. These mean change in, and it's kind of a change in production. If you want to imagine this as a point on a graph, you can show 1, 0, or 0, 1, and 10, 0, and 0, 10, and kind of take these 2 points and draw a line between it, and you can almost take this as calculating the slope, right? But because this is a nice simple table, we can kind of skip that and instead just plug in the numbers. But if you have a graph, you can use a change value. That's what the delta or the triangle means. So we're just going to plug in the value. So we have 10 in the numerator and 1 in the denominator, and it's pretty simple math. That's 10 units of butter. So we've calculated the opportunity cost of a gun, or how much the US has to give up to produce 1 gun, is 10 units of butter. So you can do this with any set of numbers, right? As long as it matches a table, perhaps, that you're given. And the numbers are obviously really easy here, but if you're weird numbers, you can actually calculate out. So now that we have this idea of opportunity cost, let's take a look at advantage. So when we talk about advantage in economics, we usually talk about production, right? How much stuff can you produce? And we look at absolute production, we're talking about just how much of something can you make. So if we compare 2 different entities or 2 different parties, we look at how much they can produce and determine which one can produce more. So let's look at this table down here. So it said the USA can produce this, same as above, and France can produce this. They can choose one or the other. So we're looking simply at volume. Let's talk about the absolute advantage in terms of production of butter. So we look at France. France can produce 50 units of butter as opposed to America's just 10, right? So this is really a how much volume. Oops. And simply put, when you talk about absolute advantage, you're thinking bigger is better. If you have more, then you have the absolute advantage. Comparative advantage is a little bit trickier. Comparative advantage is almost the opposite. How efficient are you at producing something? Can you produce something with giving up less of something else? So we already calculated the opportunity cost for a gun in the US, and the numbers are the same. So using some quick logic, you'd find that the same is true here. You can do the same math. So the opportunity cost of a gun in the US is 10 units of butter, but in France it's 50 units of butter. So America is more efficient at making guns, for example, because they have to give up less. So they have the comparative advantage in the production of guns. So here when you think about comparative advantage, you think lower is better because you're talking about lower opportunity cost. And that's what comparative advantage is there. So now we have these pretty basic ideas, right? Oh, quickly, before we go back to that, because this is going to apply later, for opportunity cost, if you take the reciprocal of this, you can find the opportunity cost of the opposite. So let's copy and paste this quickly over here. And let's put it down here. And instead say OC of gun. We're just going to demonstrate it, but trust me, if we say opportunity cost of butter instead, then we flip these around, right? Because we want the opposite. So guns now go in the numerator, and because we're looking for the opportunity cost of butter, butter goes in the denominator. What you're looking for is always in the denominator. Flip the numbers. Hey, and would you look at that? 0.1 units of gun, right? So really, really quickly, you can take a look after finding just one, find the opportunity cost of the other good by taking the reciprocal. So we've got that. Now let's take a look at a question. This is actually from the 2016 AP Macroeconomics exam. And we're going to skip part D because it's about something else, but you can go to this website and look up past exams. These are real questions that were on real AP tests. We're going to look at this question right here. So let's take a look, and using what we just learned, we can actually answer most of this question. The following table shows the number of donuts or cupcakes that John and Erica can each produce in one day. Notice how the question says or. So this is the same thing as I was talking about up here. You can produce one thing or the other. So that makes it really easy to calculate opportunity cost, for example. But part A, let's go slow. Who has the absolute advantage in producing donuts? Okay, absolute advantage, let's check up here. How much? So we're talking about which one can produce more and bigger is better. So we're looking at donuts, John and Erica. So John can produce 200 donuts and Erica has 150. So we know that John has absolute advantage in the production of donuts. And the College Board asks you to explain and keep it nice and brief. Answer in full sentences when you write the test, but 200 is greater than 150. That's the explanation. All right, so let's look at part B. Who has the comparative advantage in producing donuts, and explain? Okay, so this question is getting a little bit trickier. We're talking about comparative advantage, right? So we're talking about opportunity cost here. So let's figure out the opportunity cost for each of these parties. So let's do John first, because he's up top. So we said OC of a donut, right? How much are you giving up? Equals, let's paste that back in. We're changing this now, right? Because we want cupcakes in the numerator and donuts in the denominator, because that's the cost that we're looking for. So similar to how we did earlier with France and the US, we can just plug in the values because they're nice and they don't give us a table, or they give us a table instead of a graph. So cupcakes, 100 goes in the numerator, 200 goes in the denominator, that's donuts, oops, equals, quickly, you can do that, 1 over 2, or 0.5 cupcakes. Let's do the same thing for Erica, so we can compare the two, right? Comparative advantage. Let's copy this, that's a little bit quicker. We're going to copy that across. So let's compare the values again. Cupcakes go in the numerator, so that's 50, referencing the table, and in the denominator we should have 150. So that equals, for the eagle-eyed of you, 1/3. equals 0.3 roughly cupcakes. Right, so comparative advantage, we are looking for lower is better, right? Because we're looking for opportunity cost, and 0.3 is less than 0.5. So Erica has the comparative advantage in the production of donuts. And again, it asks you to answer, so you should talk about opportunity cost for each party, but we're going to keep it short. 0.3 is, less than 0.5. So with all of this in mind, we're going to quickly build a table here, which I've already started, before we move on to part C. So we're looking at the opportunity cost for each of the parties in each of their modes of production, right? So donuts. John's opportunity cost for a donut is 0.5, let's actually use fractions, half a cupcake. Erica, we already calculated, is 1/3 of a cupcake. Using the trick that I talked about earlier, we can just take the reciprocal of the opportunity cost of a donut to find the opportunity cost of a cupcake. So the reciprocal of 1/2 is 2 donuts, and the reciprocal of 1/3 is 3 donuts. So you can do the math again, but we're going to skip over it because this is true. Right? You can do the math. So let's look at part C. Assume that John and Erica decide to specialize according to their comparative advantages and that 1 cupcake is exchanged for 4 donuts. Indicate whether or not specialization and trade are beneficial to John and Erica, respectively. So, comparative advantage is where each party has lower opportunity cost, right? So we have a lower opportunity cost here. So Erica, let's make this red. Erica is going to be making donuts, and John is going to be making cupcakes, because he can make cupcakes more efficiently than Erica can. So what were the terms of the trade again? Let me just write down here. 1 cupcake for 4 donuts. And we can really answer both of these for John and for Erica. Let's put John here just to remind us. Simply by thinking this through a little bit. So, John's going to be making cupcakes, right? And if he makes 1 cupcake by himself, he could make 2 donuts. So if he's trading, if he makes only cupcakes, he definitely wants to get more than 2 donuts when he trades. And he does. He gets 4 donuts. This is a great trade for John because he's almost doubling what he gets for every cupcake that he gives up. So this is an excellent trade for John. So trade or specialization, so he picks just one, specialization and trade is beneficial. Let's look at Erica on the other hand. So Erica's going to be making donuts. So the trade is 4 donuts, so let's make 4 donuts. And if she were to make 4 donuts by herself, she would expect to get at least 4/3 cupcake, right? 4 times 1/3. She's not getting 4/3 of a cupcake in this trade. She's only getting 1. So this is not good. Specialization and trade is not, specialization and trade is not beneficial. Let's correct this. Right? If she were to just do this by herself, if she didn't specialize, if she were making cupcakes and donuts by herself, she would be much more efficient. So this is not efficient. So we're going to skip part D because it talks about some other stuff. But very quickly, if you look at just these 2 ideas, right? This idea of opportunity cost and these ideas of advantage, you can answer almost 1/3 of the macroeconomics exam. A couple things of note before we end this video. Someone who has absolute advantage doesn't necessarily have comparative advantage in the same good. We saw that here with John, right? He has the absolute production of donuts, but he doesn't have the comparative advantage in the production of donuts. Erica has that. And again here, for terms of trade, because it's based on comparative advantage and opportunity cost, terms of trade that's beneficial for one party isn't necessarily beneficial for the other party as well. So let's wrap this up. Opportunity cost. These are hidden costs that exist when you sacrifice one thing to do another. It's the sacrifice, that's the cost. And you can calculate it using this change in equation. And then there's this idea of advantage in production, where absolute, how much, and volume, simply talking about who can produce more of something, whereby bigger is better, and for comparative advantage, how efficient can you be, whereby can you reduce your opportunity cost as much as possible, where lower is better. Thank you. Hopefully you learned something in the past couple minutes, and I look forward to working with you soon. Thanks.